All right, welcome back to X Squared Radio. Our YouTube live scan is continuing now, and I have Suzanne Ross on the phone with me. How are you tonight?
I'm really well. How are you, Brooks?
Is it snowing over there in Sedona again?
No, it isn't snowing, but we got a really good rainfall earlier today. It was just pouring. So we have a creek down by our house and it's just rushing now. So it's kind of exciting.
Well, all right. So we have two guests coming on tonight. You're going to stay for about an hour?
Yeah. And I'll spend the next 15, 20 minutes introducing them because they'll be joining us about 6:45 my time. So
Yes, I'm watching the call boards to see when they come in. So we're talking about the global reset. We're talking about how the early civilizations were on the gold standard, and the United States was on the gold standard up until 1971 when Richard Nixon took us off. And of course, it was a difficult thing to get a hold of. They had wage and price freezes. They had crazy inflation. The Federal Reserve was trying everything you could do to try to get a hold of the economy once we unpinned our currency from gold. And basically, they haven't been able to do it ever since. All during the Obama administration, they did quantitative easing by printing $85 billion plus every single month and sticking it into another instrument called a bond, which a lot of people don't even understand what bonds are. But without bonds, we couldn't have shored up the dollar with these fake injections. And of course, what happened is the national debt went from about $9 trillion to $20 trillion in 9 years. It was just unbelievable. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So introduce Megan and Matthew for us and tell me a little bit about them.
yes, I just love these two. I met Matthew at a Cosmic Awakening event a couple years ago, and he, as an author name, calls himself Matthewus Imhotep. So he walked up to my table and introduced himself as Matthewus Imhotep, and I said, the architect of the pyramids? And he said, I said, well, of course I know that. So we got to talking about Egypt and the mystery schools and, our shared fascination with Egypt, as I'm sure much of the population has. And one thing led to the next, and he ended up coming over and bringing his partner, Megan. And as soon as she walked in, I just fell in love with her immediately. She's incredibly delightful. They're both fun, funny, and very brilliant and tuned into what's going on in the world as far as finance and politics.
Well, it takes somebody brilliant. I mean, I'm into the scientific of everything, but I'm a mathematician and a statistician by profession, and I'm just fascinated by all of the algorithms and the subtle effects that the economy, what we call the economy, actually goes through almost minute by minute. I know a guy out in Salt Lake City that has a computer program that trades currencies, and they'll do about 200 micro trades a month. That's a lot of trades. But they will trade and they'll make maybe 0.1% here or 0.05 of a percent there. And over time, like over a year's time, it makes about 50%. All the up and downs, all the little maneuvers between the various currencies trading around the planet, that's what this computer program does. Of course, they have millions of dollars tied up in it, and they're all little, George Soros wannabes, and they're all making, 18, 19% on their money easily, maybe even more than that, 25%. It's crazy interest rates that they're making. But it's all based on this uncertainty in the currencies and how they trade. And it takes a lot of attention and mathematical ability to be able to keep up with it. So you'd have to be smart.
And they've dedicated their lives to that at this point. They're just online all the time, and they're just so tuned in and they get daily updates. I get some of those daily updates now as well. I'm not going to profess to understand all of them, but when it comes to all the different digital currencies, they can tell you, what's out there and how it's doing and why. And so I just, find that really interesting. And of course, letting us know that this is the future for humanity is digital currency. And then, above and beyond that, their goal is to find ways to funnel some of these great resources of wealth around the world into humanitarian projects. So, we know that there's some groups that are hoarding large amounts of gold. And so one of their goals is to shake some of that loose. And they do have some contacts on the inside that, make this actually, possible. So, but I'll let them expand on that. And then, they are both very spiritually inspired. And so it's really nice to have that combination. Matthew had an awakening at the Giza pyramids and the Great Pyramid in the King's Chamber. And that led him on a path of really wanting to understand the creation codes, what sacred geometry goes into this matrix of creation that we're perceiving. And, he feels like some of those magical codes and shapes and designs, like Flower of Life, all can activate our consciousness and elevate it to a higher level. And so, again, that's something you can get in with him more about. But Megan, on the other hand, is a psychic, and she had a remarkable experience of being shown that she would, serve as a psychic intuitive for, earth-changing events and work with high level intel. And, she at the time was a hairdresser at a high-end shop in the Bay Area. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but no, I'm not doing that. And then these beings, these Elohim beings told her, listen, we're just the messengers. You told us to come back and let you know at this point in your life what you had signed up for. So we're just telling you what you told us to do, and, the message you wanted you to relay. So her story is really interesting too. And go ahead.
We're aware that 2019 is the year of light, and a lot of mighty changes are going to take place this year. A lot of things, a lot of the dark cabal have been called out of their caves and their basements and their cellars and their vaults, and they've been forced into the open, into the public eye to do battle. And now we can all see them for who they really are. And they're desperate. They are cornered. They are really afraid. You can see it in their eyes. You can hear it in their speeches. You can see it in their desperation. Many of them are going to try to run for office, for public office, for president or senator or congressman or something, because while you're running for office, you're much less likely to be prosecuted for a crime, because then it's kind of perceived to be, political payback or political retribution. And so we kind of leave political candidates alone. But we're already seeing that. We're already seeing candidates that have been taking bribes and doing all kinds of shenanigans under the table. They've already announced they're running for president, and they're going to be moving forward through the election process and thinking that that's going to keep them immune from arrest and prosecution. So there's a big, big game afoot here. And I'm not the only one that's written about this, but I was, in 2018 wrote the book Charm of Favor, which lays out a plot where this dark cabal, this syndicate, they need to have something disastrous happen, like a crash or an assassination, or they need a big terrorist event. I mean, a hurricane wasn't big enough. We breezed through that with no problem. President Trump was right on the spot. But something bigger than that, something more devastating than that, could be blamed on him and could, of course, you got all the press that's going to help them. The point that I'm trying to make is everybody feels this tension. I'm not a psychic. I'm not privy to this information, but I can read the signs as well as anybody, maybe a little better. And I feel like that we're nearing what I call a juxtaposition, a point at which we're going to go into a mess. And there's a lot of ways out the other side. Somebody needs to pick the right path out of that mess. Hopefully, Megan and Matthew are the ones to be able to see that path, and we'll talk about that tonight. They haven't called in yet, but we are looking for their call on the board. Is that the way you feel about it too?
Right. Yes. And so they will be speaking at the Beyond the Matrix event coming up here in Sedona. And what they're going to be doing is they are going to be giving the audience an update on, where we stand with the sovereignty movement. And of course, that includes, freedom from the central banking systems and digital currency and the global reset. So, they'll be presenting an update on that, but also be helping us understand, the forces that are way above and beyond the little puppets we see running around in Washington. And this is who Megan deals with. She deals with the galactic councils who are overseeing planet Earth. And as far-fetched as that might sound to some of your listeners, it's very real. We are just one planet in a mass network of planets and galaxies out there, and we are interconnected. And so she connects with beings who have, been on humanity's side for millennia, because, that's who we need to collaborate with right now, because there's been many, many dark forces who have been controlling our DNA, who have been controlling this master matrix of, this 3D illusion that we think is so real. And so she goes way above and beyond predicting what's going to happen in, Congress or with the president. She goes to the higher level of, getting guidance on where we need to go and what's going to happen and what's unfolding. Because if you know in advance, what's unfolding, then you can be more proactive about what steps you're going to take. And so, this is who she tunes into, which I find really fascinating. Listen, Brooks, before they came and lived with me for a few months, I didn't know about any of this. And my hair was blown back for 3 months when they told me, one thing after the next about what's been going on with these dark Luciferian forces for so long. It's shocking. It's shocking. Yep. Between the pedophilia and the drug trafficking and sex trafficking. And, these are the leaders of our country and our world, for goodness sakes.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And I talk about that in the Birth Trilogy, and I also talk about it in the book Charm of Favor. Although Charm of Favor is designed to be kind of a true crime adventure story, you cannot get into this very deeply before you realize that there's some very old and very dark power that is out there. And I don't mean old like 100 years old. I mean old like 100,000 years old, that is working on this earth behind the scenes, but he can't work with those of us that are light beings because it's allergic to us. In order to do business with, in order to speak with and commune with this being, you have to get dark. You've got to get really dark. And in order to reach that point, you have to make certain oaths and certain covenants, and there's certain rituals that you have to do. And in the book, of course, they're unspeakable. They're unspeakably evil. But now we're beginning to see it. I mean, look at what the governor of New York has done. He has approved the murder of babies right up to the time when they're born. Utterly something our nation, like I have often said, that which we once abhor, we soon tolerate, then embrace. And that's where we are. And this is all part of that oath and that covenant. with this great dark power, you have to make tremendously evil oaths and covenants. And that's what we're seeing brought out into the open for the first time. We've suspected it. We've kind of, seen it in the History Channel. We've seen it in old paintings and drawings and wood cuttings and, things we found in dungeons that we don't even want to think about how they used them. But now we're beginning to see real live modern people involved in things like cannibalism and pedophilia, and it isn't small, it's huge. It is prolific throughout this dark, wealthy, upper level cabal class, from Hollywood all the way to Belgium. So I see one of them has just popped in the call board, so let me go ahead and see who's on the line. Let's see here. Welcome to the program. Who do I have?
This is Matthew and Megan.
All right, both on the same line. This is great. Welcome to the program. Suzanne's on with me. How are you?
Wonderful. Glad to be here.
Yeah, very excited to be here.
Well, we were kind of laying the foundation. I don't know if you listened to the program before you came on. We were laying the foundation of the history of gold and how it was used as a currency to make a system of exchange between people who do labor and people who want to buy things, land transactions and various things like that for thousands and thousands of years. But we also have historical records of that gold being replaced by fiat currencies, and which led to the rather swift total annihilation of those empires, and how close we appear to be as a dollar-based economy that is totally fiat-based since 1971. That's not really that long, by the way. We're only talking 48 years. But in 48 years, our country has gone from about $3 trillion in debt to $21 trillion in debt. And from here, it hockey sticks. There's no coming back from it unless we do what? We're going to talk about this global reset. What does it mean?
Well, it means different things to different people. There are those that are tracking the currency revaluation that hope to have bought something very cheaply and end up with, millions of dollars. And then there are those that understand deeper behind the scenes. It's a restructuring, creating a new banking system that goes back to the value that you were speaking of, because a fiat system obviously is really worth nothing, is very easy to manipulate. And so to us, it means implementing new systems, safer systems with more security. And obviously, cryptocurrency is one example of a system that eliminates the middleman. And so we're incorporating that in a variety of ways with our sovereign bank and the things that we're working on. There's quite a bit to the subject, but to us, the global reset is something different than to most of the people that are following, the RV, as it were.
Well, I know that Christine Lagarde, who's one of the corrupt high priestesses with the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which is associated with the World Bank, which I've already explained to my listeners is clearly the most corrupt financial institution that has ever existed on the earth. They call the global economic reset as the virtual elimination of the dollar and the replacement of it with something called a strategic drawing rights bond. And it may or may not be gold backed, but the main goal of it is to remove the United States as an economic power in the world. That's their motivation, and I hate to tell you this, but the majority of the world is behind them. So fortunately, those that have the gold make the rules. So we're the ones with the gold. So right now we're making the rules and we have the guns to back it up. But that may not always be the case. Cryptocurrency is a little bit of a wild card. Started out with a thing called the Bitcoin, which is based on the rarity and finite, not finite, it is infinite, I suppose, availability of prime numbers. It started out very plentiful, and now they're adding one, not very often. So it is rare, and it is something that is verifiable. The principles of cryptocurrencies have been around for a long, long time.
Obviously, the phantom aspect of it is that it's still fiat because it doesn't have any value behind it. It's just a trusted mechanism, but we're bringing value, gold and other natural reserves behind the coins that we're doing. So that, is an important aspect to bring value back to what we actually see more than trust. We see it as a true intrinsic value.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for us, it just represents a solution. It represents an ability for us to make moves outside of the current corrupted system, which we've had difficulties with in the past. And I think everybody knows, unless they've been sleeping on a rock for the last decade, that we have massive corruption in our financial system.
For sure.
Yeah, we absolutely have massive corruption in our financial system because if you just think about it for a minute, the financial system is just a system of exchange, okay? I do value on one end. I take my bulldozer and I create a foundation for you, and you pay me to move that dirt. So there's the value that I've done. I've moved the dirt, you've done something else for value, and we've exchanged. But somehow, in the middle, the system of exchange thought that it was the value. That because the money is in the bank actually has value. And that's where they got lost. They looked at all the money that was in the vault and they started calling it their own. And now I think pretty much the way the banking regulations are, when you deposit your paycheck in the bank, it belongs to the bank. You have to borrow it to get it out, right?
Exactly. They won't give it up. Many people we know have tried to move their large asset value from the bank, and they're not allowed to. They're given a song and dance, all kinds of excuses. And yeah, in the end, they ultimately want to give you some kind of a loan and, dissuade you from taking out your asset. And truth be told, they really don't have it. They've overextended themselves anyway.
Well, what happened when Bill Clinton repealed the last bastion or the last piece of Glass-Steagall, what it allowed banks to do is to buy brokerage houses. So you had banks able to buy, say, stock market trading, so they could deal in securities and they could make loans for your house or your car or give you a checking account. And it was disastrous. I mean, Lehman Brothers was just the tip of the iceberg, believe me. Then there was LIBOR scandals and everything else that went on with it. But here's the thing where it meets Main Street. Where it meets Main Street is they connected these big vacuum hoses from the central bank all the way down to Main Street. So when you take your paycheck that you earned down at the fire department or down at the dollar store working there, you put it in the bank, that vacuum is turned on and that money is extracted from your little town and it goes all the way to the central bank and it never comes back. You can't borrow it. You can't access it. If you went to the bank and said, well, I have $100,000 in my savings account. I would like to pull all that money out and I'm going to move to Mexico where I can live like a king for 20 years. They won't let you have your money because they don't have it. It's at the central bank. It's going to take some time to get that back out. This is where we are. All the little banks have been turned into teller offices for the big banks. And that's where the corruption has set in.
Well, you're probably familiar with the new HR 25 and HR 204 that they're trying to pass, right? With the abolishment of the IRS and auditing of the Federal Reserve.
two great ideas, but I didn't know that was the number of them. Definitely need to audit and put to rest the Federal Reserve, and we need to repeal the 16th Amendment. But anyway, that's just me.
So those are on the docket, and there's intent to have lots of massive transformation come about, and obviously we work on multiple aspects of that. So there's things we can and cannot share, but that's something we're very excited about.
Well, I know that with this new Congress, the numbering system starts over again. All the bills that were passed by Congress but not passed by the Senate, they die. They go away. They have to go back to Congress and be renumbered. So we're all the way back to now HR 2 or whatever it is. And I don't think Congress is going to get much of anything done because they're too focused on trying to take trips to see the troops in Afghanistan on Air Force jets to get anything done. So I don't know if those bills are ever going to come back or not.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of change happening right now, and there are a lot of reasons to be hopeful about the future of this planet and this country. And
but
the reality is,
we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Don't go away.